The British Empire was one of the largest and most powerful empires in world history, spanning territories across the globe for centuries. Its origins can be traced back to the late 16th century, when England began establishing colonies in North America and the Caribbean. The British Empire had a profound impact on world history, shaping the economic, political, and cultural development of many countries around the globe. Its legacy, both positive and negative, continues to be felt in many parts of the world today. The beginnings of the British Empire can be traced back to the late 16th century, when England began establishing colonies in North America. The first permanent English settlement in the Americas was established at Jamestown, Virginia, in 1607. In the 17th century, England established trading posts and colonies in India, and also began colonizing the Caribbean and parts of Africa. During this time, England also gained control of some Dutch colonies, including what is now New York. The 18th century saw significant expansion of the British Empire, with the acquisition of Canada and much of India, as well as a number of islands in the Caribbean. The British also established a presence in Australia and New Zealand during this time. In the 19th century, the British Empire continued to expand, with the colonization of large parts of Africa and the acquisition of territories in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. The British also played a major role in the Opium Wars in China, which resulted in the ceding of Hong Kong to Britain. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw the British Empire reach its peak, with the acquisition of additional territories in Africa and the Middle East, as well as the establishment of protectorates in a number of countries. At its height, the British Empire controlled a vast number of territories around the globe, including North America, Canada, Bermuda, British Honduras, now Belize, and parts of the United States including New York, Virginia, and Massachusetts. Caribbean, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, Antigua and Barbuda, the Bahamas, and many other islands. South America, British Guiana, now Guyana. Africa, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Zambia, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Egypt, Sudan, Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, the Gambia, and many other territories. Asia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Burma, Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Brunei, and many other territories. Australia and Oceania, Australia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, Fiji, Tonga, Samoa, and many other islands. It's important to note that not all of these territories were controlled in the same way. Some were British colonies, while others were protectorates or territories under British influence. Additionally, the extent of British control varied from place to place and changed over time. There were a number of factors that enabled the British to dominate and control such a vast number of countries and territories during the time of the British Empire. Military power. The British had a highly advanced military with advanced weapons and technologies that enabled them to conquer and control territories around the globe. Naval power. The British had a powerful navy that allowed them to control the seas and transport troops and supplies across the world. Trade and commerce. The British Empire was built on the foundation of trade and commerce, with the British East India Company playing a major role in the colonization of India and the establishment of British control in many other parts of Asia. Diplomacy and alliances. The British were skilled at forming alliances and working with local leaders to establish control over territories. They also used diplomacy to maintain control over their territories and prevent conflicts from escalating. Propaganda and ideology. The British used propaganda and ideology to justify their imperialist policies and to convince the public that the expansion of the British Empire was necessary for the growth and development of the British nation. The British Empire took advantage of other countries in a number of ways in order to dominate and control them, such as economic exploitation. The British Empire was built on the foundation of trade and commerce, and the British used their control over many territories to exploit their resources and labor. For example, in India, the British forced local farmers to grow cash crops for export, rather than food for local consumption, leading to famines and economic hardship for local people. Political oppression. The British Empire often imposed its own political systems on the territories it controlled, suppressing local traditions and customs and imposing British values and beliefs. This led to the marginalization of local people and the concentration of power in the hands of British officials and elites. Cultural suppression. The British Empire often sought to impose its own culture on the territories it controlled, suppressing local languages, traditions, and customs. For example, in India, the British banned the teaching of local languages in schools and imposed the use of English. Military force. The British Empire often used military force to establish and maintain control over territories, suppressing local uprisings and rebellions and using violence to enforce British rule. Divide and conquer. The British Empire often played different groups against each other in order to maintain control over territories. For example, in India, the British often pitted Hindus against Muslims, exacerbating tensions between different religious groups. The reasons behind its desire to dominate other countries are complex and multifaceted, and there is no single answer to this question. However, some of the key reasons include economic motives. The British Empire was primarily driven by economic motives. The empire sought to establish trade links with other countries, exploit their resources, and expand its markets. The acquisition of colonies provided the British with access to valuable resources such as gold, silver, diamonds, and other minerals, as well as a captive market for British manufactured goods. National pride. The British saw themselves as a superior race and believed that it was their duty to civilize and Christianize the uncivilized peoples of the world. The idea of spreading British values and culture was a major driving force behind British imperialism. Strategic interests. The British Empire also had strategic interests in dominating other countries. For example, the acquisition of naval bases and coaling stations around the world allowed the British to protect their shipping lanes and maintain their naval supremacy. Ideological motives. The British Empire was also motivated by ideology, particularly the belief in the superiority of Western civilization and the need to spread democracy, capitalism, and the rule of law. The impact of the British Empire on the countries it colonized was profound and far-reaching, and varied from country to country. Some of the key impacts include economic exploitation. The British Empire relied heavily on the exploitation of the resources and labor of the countries it colonized. This often involved the extraction of raw materials and the forced labor of local people, leading to economic underdevelopment and poverty in these countries. Cultural imperialism. The British Empire imposed its culture, language, and values on the countries it colonized, often at the expense of local cultures and traditions. This led to a loss of cultural identity and a sense of dislocation for many people in these countries. Political instability. The British Empire often imposed political structures and systems that were not suited to the local context, leading to political instability and conflict in many countries. The legacy of this instability can still be seen in many parts of the world today. Infrastructure development. The British Empire did bring some benefits to the countries it colonized, such as the development of infrastructure, such as roads, railways, and ports. However, these developments were often geared towards the needs of the empire rather than the local population. Education. The British Empire also brought education to many of the countries it colonized, which had both positive and negative effects. On the one hand, education provided opportunities for people to improve their lives and challenge the status quo. On the other hand, education was often used as a tool of cultural imperialism and social control. The fall of the British Empire was a gradual process that occurred over several decades, beginning in the aftermath of World War II. Some of the key factors that contributed to the decline of the empire include economic decline. The British Empire was built on economic exploitation and the extraction of resources from its colonies. However, by the mid-20th century, many of the empire's former colonies had gained independence and were no longer willing to submit to British economic domination. This led to a decline in the empire's economic power. Changing global politics. The post-World War II era saw the emergence of new global powers, such as the United States and the Soviet Union, which challenged Britain's status as a global superpower. The Cold War in particular led to a shift in global politics and a reconfiguration of power relations. Domestic political changes. Britain itself underwent significant political changes in the post-war era, including the establishment of a welfare state and the expansion of democratic rights. These changes led to a shift in public attitudes towards imperialism and the role of the empire in the world. Resistance from colonial subjects. The empire was also undermined by resistance and rebellion from its colonial subjects. Movements for independence and self-determination emerged across the empire, challenging the legitimacy of British rule and weakening the empire's hold on its colonies. Military and geopolitical challenges. The empire was also challenged by military and geopolitical challenges, such as the Suez Crisis in 1956, which exposed Britain's weakness and led to a loss of international prestige. Overall, the British Empire was a complex and multifaceted phenomenon, with both positive and negative aspects. While it played a key role in shaping the modern world, it also caused significant harm to the countries it colonized. The legacy of the empire continues to be felt in many parts of the world today, and its impact on global politics, economics, and culture cannot be understated.
Here's 40 shillings on the drum to those who volunteer to come to list and fight the foe today.